there. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Laura Webster, the National's News and Features Editor, and I'm here joined by Hamish Morrison, one of our newest political reporters. Hi, Hamish.
Hiya. Happy to be here.
Today, we're going to have a quick chat about what just happened at FMQs. So we're going to run through the main points, but first off, we're going to kick off with a very interesting choice of attack line from Douglas Ross, which I think you will be intrigued by.
Douglas Ross. I do want to have a serious discussion about this, and this is a grown-up matter, an issue, and it was telling in a very long answer, several minutes there, the First Minister couldn't even bring herself to accept. This is chopping the bottom off of doors. However she tries to dress it up, however she tries to say it's basic common sense, it has been met with derision, because it is a serious issue here, and there is more consequences as well. Safety issues, concerns about the risk from fire from this plan have been raised. This morning, a retired firefighter wrote to us. He said, and I quote, "The doors in a school are essential for holding back heat and smoke should a fire start." The First Minister wants a grown-up and serious conversation about this. So does she agree with that quote from the retired firefighter? And can she stand up and tell us what consultation her government had with the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service about these plans?
Right, Hamish. So what the hell is Douglas Ross talking about chopping the bottom off the doors? What is this?
So they have proposed chopping the bottom off the doors, which does sound, I think, to the sort of casual observer as quite a silly thing. I think there are a couple of things that are important to remember here. Firstly, as maybe sort of sensationally headline grabbing as it is something that would improve airflow in rooms. So it is probably an option that they are considering. But I think also what is really important to remember is he doesn't mention the figure in that clip. There's been about £300,000 is a figure that's been sort of bandied about. This comes from a letter written by Shirley Ann Somerville to the Education Committee outlining the capital support for schools to change sort of layout and function. There's about 1.6 million allocated for air filters, 2.4 million on fans, but these are all example calculations that they used for a sort of generic school room that they could fix. So they've identified about 2,000 doors in Scottish schools and nurseries that could benefit from a chop, should they wish to do it. Councils might not do it. Councils might not want to do it. They might want to use that money for other things, which by the looks of things, as far as I can tell from this letter, because these are example calculations, they could well do, they could well not use it. And trying to make it into sort of, you know, trying to make the government look also ridiculous for proposing a practical measure to increase ventilation, which the Tories have been talking about in Parliament for some time. It does really come across as kind of cheap political point scoring, I think, as far as I'm concerned. He talked about it for about 10 minutes as well. I mean, that was the thrust of almost every question he asked the First Minister today. And I just don't think that was a particularly good use of his time.
What do you think would have been a better use of Douglas Ross's time? I mean, it certainly feels like there's a lot of news going on today, and I was pretty shocked to see him go with that chopping the bottom of doors off question.
Well, I mean, I think, you know, given the fact that we're in an out-of-control cost of living crisis, Chancellor's announced more funding for it today. I mean, his Chancellor, the Tory Chancellor in London, has announced more funding for it today. He could have sort of put the pressure on the Scottish Government to say, you know, how are we going to use this money? Where is it going to go? What conversations are you in about this? I mean, he could, even if he'd wanted to go on this schools line, could have asked, you know, what action is the Scottish Government requiring of councils? And if they're not requiring any action of councils, then why are they not doing that? That would have been a much stronger line of attack rather than going on for 10 minutes about a Daily Mail, you know, headline that just is completely sensationalised.
So to summarise, the Scottish Government announced some money to improve ventilation in schools, and Douglas Ross found a problem with some doors being cut.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously got it in for handymen across Scotland.
So how about Scottish Labour Chief Anas Sarwar? Did he have a bit of a better exchange with the First Minister during FMQs today?
I think he had a slightly better. One was kind of talking quite a low bar there. He was talking about a Labour motion in the Commons, which again, bringing in the sort of actions of SNP members in the Commons and Holyrood is just not that productive, I don't think. SNP voted against, but didn't vote for a Labour motion calling for a windfall tax on North Sea oil producers. In the Commons, the SNP raised concerns that such a tax would potentially affect jobs, and oil and gas sector employs thousands and thousands of people in Aberdeen and across the northeast of Scotland, and there wasn't any mention of or any real consideration in Ed Miliband's motion of how this could affect people's livelihoods. Stephen Flynn, the MP for Aberdeen South, said that thousands of his constituents could lose their jobs, and it just wasn't a point that was addressed by anybody speaking to the motion. It's also a bit of a cheap political trick to use these sort of motions that have got virtually no chance of becoming policy to generate headlines to say, oh, well, the SNP, not again voted against, didn't vote for a motion calling for a windfall tax on oil and gas producers, which certainly, I mean, Nicola Sturgeon herself said that she would absolutely be willing to take more money from people that are profiting massively, unbelievable amounts from an energy crisis. But at the end of the day, they had legitimate concerns with it. They weren't addressed, and Labour have sort of used it to score a political point on the SNP, where the SNP have accepted that they would like to see all companies who have benefited from the pandemic to be taxed more.
Yeah, I feel like it's not that long ago that we heard Scottish Labour having a go at the SNP over risking North Sea oil and gas jobs over the Cambo development as well. So it's a bit of a U-turn from them in that regard. But was there anything else interesting that you picked up on at today's FMQs, Hamish?
Yeah, I thought Brian Whittle, Tory MSP, was approaching a point when he started talking about the deposit return scheme. Deposit return scheme has been delayed quite significantly. It won't be introduced this year. And he talked about a pilot in Wales, which he said which basically used curbside collections rather than these reverse vending machines where you put in your bottle or whatever and it comes out in cash. And he was saying, why has this not been done in Scotland? And he was maybe approaching a point, but then he linked it in with asking the First Minister to wait for a UK-wide policy, which is just, I mean, are you really going to wait for them to do anything? Are you really going to rely on them to get anything done while they're already completely mired in sleaze and scandal and, have had to park most of their legislative agenda for this parliamentary term because they're so caught up in having to answer questions about, sleaze and parties and when the Prime Minister will resign. So Nicola Sturgeon made that point, which I thought was a fair one, and also brought up that Annie Wells, MSP for Glasgow, argued for it to be delayed even further when it was initially announced that it was going to be delayed. So you just have to really ask yourself, why are the Tories seemingly batting for both sides of the argument here? Delay it, don't delay it, and then also delay it, don't delay it, but wait for a UK-wide scheme. You got three arguments in play there that Brian Whittle is, he's trying to spin three plates at one time, and they're all crashing.
I feel like you just summed up most of the Scottish Conservative kind of strategy there. Just lots of plates spinning at the same time, all of them crashing around you, and just sheer chaos everywhere. And we saw also during FMQs today, in response to a question from the SNP MSP Stuart McMillan, Nicola Sturgeon was speaking on the need for Scottish independence, which of course readers of The National would be very pleased to hear about. She started off by making a point about how the Better Together campaign had broken many of their promises, including, most famously of all, telling us that the way to remove our EU citizenship would be by voting yes. So she made that point, and while she was trying to speak to that, the unionist politicians in the chamber were heckling so much that the presiding officer actually had to intervene. So she intervened the first time and she told everybody, be quiet. And then Nicola continued speaking and making the point that what is the alternative right now? Everyone accepts there is a crisis of democracy right now. There is a crisis of cost of living. There's so much going on at Westminster, and the whole thing is a shambles, as you were saying, Hamish. And yet we are being told, Scotland, you just have to stay in your box. There is no alternative for you. And she tried to make that point. And again, the Tory members, the Labour members, the Lib Dem members were shouting and shouting over the First Minister, and Alison Johnston, the presiding officer, had to step in once again. So if you want to see the footage of that, because Nicola was very defiant, she just kept going, as she should. That's on our website if you want to check that out. But yeah, I thought that was
Can I just bring up something as well there? I think part of the reason that it's so annoying to see interventions like that is because they don't tend to do it unless a Scottish Government minister is talking about independence, and it really does sort of smack of a certain kind of ignorance to me, at least, because I think the framing of it is attempting to regard independence as not a policy, not a serious policy that the Scottish Government is in fact pursuing, but rather some sort of kind of weird fanciful obsession of the SNPs. When in actual fact it's something that they are spending money on, they are looking at it, and they were elected on a manifesto. Well, both them and the Green Party were elected on a manifesto to have an independence referendum, and they have this block where they try and frame it as something that's not an actual policy, that's something that they can just shout down, rather than something that's being seriously considered by the people running the country.
Couldn't agree with you more. And doesn't that really relate to Ian Murray's intervention to the UK government cabinet secretary in an attempt to asking them to stop the Scottish government from working on a prospectus for independence? I mean, the Scottish government was elected to do that. That is part of their manifesto, and that is democracy in action. So why are Labour, Tory and Lib Dem MSPs and MPs attempting to thwart this in this way? It makes absolutely no sense. We should be encouraging debate and discussion, not shutting it down.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, yeah, Ian Murray asking Westminster to intervene in Scotland, I mean, that just sums up sort of what he thinks of Holyrood, I would say, which is not much.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Hamish. That was really interesting. I hope that we can do this again next week, and hopefully Douglas Ross will have more to talk about other than cutting the bottoms off of doors.
Yeah, we'll see what he goes on next week. I don't know if he might move on to Windows or something.
We live in hope. All right. Well, thank you so much, National Readers, for joining us as well. Let us know what you thought in the comments below, and make sure you check out all of our FMQ stories on the website at thenational.scot and take out a subscription as well. Goodbye.
Thanks very much.